When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And today we're going to talk about weaning your baby from the breast. So this came about because I heard students talking about this in postnatal. I have to say a lot of the conversations that I end up doing podcasts from are because I'm listening to the students, and that's what we're here for. We're here to give back to you. And so I was listening to the students talking about weaning, and there was a lot of emotion around it, and there was questions. And I am not a lactation expert. I feel like I have a lot of knowledge around childbirth and pregnancy, but lactation, while I've done it myself for my kids, it is not my specialty. So I reached out to Francie Webb. Now, I believe this is Francie's third podcast episode on Yoga Birth Babies. She's a wealth of knowledge. She is delightful to talk to, and I just knew she was the person to chat with about this. So let me tell you a little bit about Francie. So Francie Webb is an IBCLC. She's an internationally board certified lactation consultant and the founder of Go Milk Yourself. She is a mom of 3, an author, and a former middle school teacher. She has worked with over 1,600 parents and provided training to over 2,000 professionals. Additionally, she has trained more than 40 doulas, and trained more than 40 lactation professionals in her Go Milk Yourself lactation training. She's been featured in The Cut, Elle.com, Mashable, and The View. And you are going to be so delighted hearing her speak, because she is just such a joy. So some of the things we talked about were some of the common reasons parents decide to wean, and the different feelings that come up in that emotional process for parents when they decide to wean. We also talk about ways partners and support people can be involved in the transition, as well as signs that your baby or toddler might be ready to start weaning. And then we get practical. All right, so what are some of the strategies or timelines for weaning? And then what can you do to reduce discomfort and engorgement from weaning? So we go really deep into this. So I'm excited for you to hear all about that. Whether it's something you're in the middle of doing, whether it's something you're contemplate doing later, it's important information to have, because if you choose to breastfeed, at some point you're going to wean. All right, now before we get to that conversation, I always live to give Prenatal Yoga Center updates. So the best way to find out about all of our workshops and our classes and our teacher training and our online classes, our on-demand library, there's so much going on, our blog, our videos, go to the website, prenatalyogacenter.com. You can check everything out. You can also sign up for the newsletter there so that you can stay in touch weekly. In our newsletter, I give out tips and videos, and just a great way to stay in touch with the community, and usually community pictures as well. And then I also want to take a moment just to thank our listeners for leaving more reviews. I've asked, you've done it. Thank you. And I'm going to ask for more. So when you have a moment, or maybe even now, if you can just leave a rating and review for the podcast, wherever you're listening to it from, I'd greatly appreciate it. It really does help us. So thank you for your time and effort. Okay, we're going to take a super quick break. When we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Francie.
Hey, it's Paris. You know, I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Hi, Francie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm so excited to be with you. I'm pumped to be with you.
I love your play on words. I am good. And you know, I'm all about full transparency. So folks out there, if this sounds a little bit echoey, it's because I'm in the studio. And if you could see it, I am hiding in the corner of the studio. I've got 4 bolsters around me, a blanket overhead to try to keep
Amazing.
it. But these are the things that we do for what we love. But I gotta get a picture of this. So thank you, Francie, for handling the probably echo sound.
A picture of this in Instagram stories or something.
It is honestly ridiculous looking. By the end, my back's going to be killing because I'm like literally crouched in the corner. But anyway, so this is, I think
you do yoga.
A good thing I do yoga. So I think this is your 3rd podcast with me.
Yes.
So this is not your first rodeo. So you know the deal. So I have had the fortune to know you often, like throughout the years. It's been a bit.
Yep.
But why don't you share a little bit about yourself? And it's been quite a path to become an IBCLC and work in the birth world. So why don't you share that with our community?
Sure. So I was a little girl walking around the world saying, I'm going to help people. That's what I always said when I was a kid. And then I would see something that was a way to help people. And I'd be like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And I was just always interested in so many things because in the end, there are a lot of different ways to help people. And I became a middle school teacher and I taught middle school full time for 11 years. And then including part-time, a total of about 15 years in the classroom, and loved it. I'm not going to say I loved every minute of it, particularly because I taught middle school.
Yes,
and
I get that.
I absolutely loved my job and I loved my relationship with students and colleagues and students' families. And I just loved the work. And I then started having babies and became curious about helping people have babies. And I became interested in feeding babies while I was pregnant with my first and, went through some challenges after and was really committed to breastfeeding working and got some great help. And then I was like, it'd be cool to help people with this. And shortly after that first was born, I learned to hand express my milk. Basically, I used the pump at the end of my arms. And that got me really interested in there are ways to make feeding work that I didn't know. And then by the time my second was born and I had a 54-minute labor that was really shocking and did not have the people that I expected to be there, I was like, maybe I'm meant to work in this world, and became a doula pretty quickly after. And all the while continued studying to become a lactation consultant. So I became a lactation consultant a couple years ago. I've been running Go Milk Yourself. It'll be 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
In August. Yeah. It's going to be 10 years. It's so crazy. I can't believe it. And I really count, I taught some people to hand express a couple years before that, privately through my lactation consultant, who I met at the prenatal yoga center, Andreas Brown. But then I started teaching groups. I started teaching people to hand express their milk through my Go Milk Yourself workshops, and it'll be 10 years this summer. And then, over time shifted from, I still do some doula work, but now I primarily manage a growing lactation practice that is primarily telehealth. And I have also fed 3 kids with my body, including my youngest who's still nursing. And all of my kids have nursed much longer than I expected because it got to a point where it just worked. And so now that's what I get to do, is focus most of my time on paying it forward with making sure people feeding babies are getting support and growing our team so that we now have I am one of 4 IBCLCs on my team now. And that's growing. We've got a number of people in training as well. And then I see people as their doula between 5 and 9 times a year. So I keep a single digit number of clients on my caseload throughout the year. And I get to just help people do impossible things all the time. It's pretty cool.
Oh my goodness. It has been so amazing to see your journey. I remember when you were studying with Andrea, like coming in to support her in the breastfeeding support groups. That, oh my gosh. And look at you now, 1 of 4, and you've got the go. I'm so impressed. And you have a book. You didn't mention your book.
That's true. It's funny because, like, I don't know if this is true for most authors, but there's a certain point where you kind of feel like your book is obsolete. That may not be true if it's a novel, but I'm like, oh, but I've learned 100,000 things since then that are not in the book. So I feel like it's outdated.
No, I get that.
Like I do that. It was a big deal.
Like that's why my teacher training continuously evolves. Like I look at what I taught. I think I've been doing the teacher training. I think it's 18 years. And I look at what I even taught maybe even 10 years ago, and it's already changed. So I completely get it. But you do have a book. So we're just putting that out there. All right. So, and you came onto the podcast talking about your book. So we'll make sure that's in the show notes. All right. So this time we're actually talking about weaning. And the reason this came up is because it came up in conversation in postnatal yoga, where a few moms were talking about weaning. They had a lot of different emotions about it, different reasons. And someone said, do you have a podcast on this? I said, oh my goodness, I do not.
You're like, wait, how could I not have a podcast on this?
I know. I really thought that because I'm like, I have breastfeeding podcasts, at least, I would say honestly, like a quarter of my podcast, probably around something with breastfeeding. And I realized I even have like 2 on formula feeding. I'm like, how do I not have something on weaning? So let's jump into that. So what are some of the most common reasons that when the parents you work with decide to wean?
Oh, I love this question. Like, I think I knew you were going to ask me that, but I'm just seeing it like it's new for the first time. Wow. Ask me that one more time.
Okay. So what are some of the most common reasons parents decide to start to wean?
Great. Going back to work is one. There's some people I work with who would like to be weaned by the time they go back to work. And when I say that, I mean like fully weaned. There are some people who are like, here's when I'm going back to work at 4 months. And by then, and they'll say something like, I don't want to pump when I get back to work. So how can we work that out? Now, the first thing I want to tell you, Deb, is that I've worked with many people on weaning, including myself. and people are more likely, in my experience, to do it for longer than they thought they were going to, not shorter. Like, it's more common that someone will come to me and be like, I want to wean by X time. And when we get to X time, they're like, oh, I don't really want to. Or I realize that I can actually nurse my baby, twice a day and do that for a long time. And then they'll come to me and be like, so how long do people do this? So they think that weaning might be like a much shorter container of time than it actually ends up being for them. But I think going back to work or some type of dynamic related to work, like I'm going on a work trip by X time and I'd like to be weaned by then. Or sometimes it's my husband and I are going on a big trip, in 6 months, and I really think I'd like to be weaned. So I guess we would kind of think about that as like a logistical thing. And it's unfortunate in our country that, our maternity leave situation is not the way that it is in other places. I had a fascinating conversation with a close friend of mine last week whose baby is 9 months old, and she's going back to work around 14 months, and she lives in London. And she did a lactation visit with a colleague of mine. And it wasn't until she came back to me and she said, Francie, those things that you told me that I would need to do to prepare to go back to work, she says, I'm not going to have to do them because my kid's going to be 14 months old at the time. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even cross my mind. I'm used to talking to people who are going back to work at 3 months, at 4 months, at 2.5 months, at 6 months, but the actions are very, very different. So I think the primary reason that people are weaning is something related to work or some other life shift or plans that they have. And then sometimes people will come to me and say, I am just done with this. Like I worked with somebody recently whose kid was 3, I think he was 3.5. And she was just like, I'm ready to have my time back, my body back. And like many people who are nursing toddlers, she had a much longer runway than she originally thought she wanted because we were able to wean over time to where it was sustainable. for chunks. So that is a very long answer to your question.
No, that's great. And I love that. I didn't even think about like the toddlerness. I had 2 weaning experiences that I'm sure will come up. But the next question actually makes me think of my second, who kind of self-weaned herself. I did not, I wanted to breastfeed longer. And she around 14, 15 months started just turning her head and then pushing the boob away. And I was kind of devastated, to be honest. I really wanted to give it a longer shot. And so it brought up so much. Like I felt guilty. I was sad. Then there was a moment I'm like, oh, I have a little freedom. Like I don't have to haul my breast pump around and deal with this. So it does bring up a lot of feelings. Why do you think it's such an emotional process for so many parents?
It's an emotional process because there's so many things attached to it. And the things that are attached to it might be some shoulds.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like I should breastfeed my baby for this long.
That is exactly what I felt. I felt guilty. I really did. I'm like, I should do this. I did. I felt really guilty. I really believe in the, this sounds so cheesy, like the power of breast milk. I think it's amazing. And I felt guilty that she wasn't going to get it. And I can't even believe it. She's 11 and I still feel guilty.
I can actually believe that. I actually can. We're really good at holding right on to that guilt, aren't we?
We really are. I did. I felt guilty that she wasn't going to get the nutrients that I believe in breast milk. And I know, she's amazing and strong and wonderful now, but I had such guilt. What else do you think happens with parents when
it's really interesting that you brought that up, like the nutritional piece, which like I'm a lactation consultant. I think about the nutritional piece, of course, right? But like when I look back at having my first child 13 years ago, and then all of the people I'm working with now, who are many of them are like similar ages as I was when I had her. I feel like now people are less didactic and less like all or nothing than I was. Like I was sure that all of the digestive problems that I had my entire life, and my mom would say, the moment I got pregnant with you, she told me my stomach was a mess, and then as soon as you came out, I was fine, but your stomach was a mess. So like I had this, and I mean, I had all kinds of gut issues and like lactose intolerance. Like I gave up gluten a couple years ago and it made a really big difference in my health, like things like this. But there was this idea of, I somehow decided that the reason I had gut issues was because I was primarily formula fed. Like I just made that up at some point. And I think it's because I became obsessed with like processed foods are screwing up my gut, right? Mm-hmm. And, there's all kinds of things we could say about this that are happening now, including politically and choices being made about what can be in foods and how it's revealed and whatever. But like the bottom line is I was very much a purist about it. Like processed foods hurt my stomach, so I cannot eat them. And so you can imagine there was like some disordered eating at different times in my life. And, I remember seeing a campus nutritionist and when I was in college and actually being able to identify the things that didn't work for my stomach and then being able to like choose foods that worked for me. Right. So I go into this being like, well, I'm going to screw up my kid's gut health if she has formula because it's a processed food. I just had this idea about processed foods. And so I think that there are fewer people now who, well, let me put it this way. The question that you asked was, ask me the question again. Oh, other reasons, right? Yeah. So like nutrition is one of them. Like there are people who are like, I think I want to wean, but I'm also worried about my baby not getting the antibodies and not getting all of the health benefits of breast milk. I want them to get those benefits. And I mean, I've worked with people in both extremes, like people who are like, I am going to give my baby a bajillion ounces of breast milk until forever. And then people who are like, I know for a fact for medical reasons that I'm going to make a teeny tiny bit of milk, but I will make sure that 100% of that milk gets to my baby, even though this baby's going to be primarily formula fed. So I think people are excited about the benefits of breast milk. And then part of the should is like, but wait, isn't this better for them nutritionally? And I guess the reason that some people, I guess that's more of an answer to like, why are people concerned about weaning as opposed to, right?
Like the emotional process.
Right. Yeah. But I think that the number one reason I see for people wanting to wean or feeling they need to wean is because of something logistical. Like from an operations standpoint, I need to make some changes in my life. And then other reasons are wanting to be able to take care of their own health in some way that they feel that they cannot do. Sometimes I work with people who there's a specific medication that they need or want to go back on that they have not been on. And they're like, I want to. Actually, the person I mentioned someone who was nursing a toddler recently, and she wanted to go on a particular medication to lose weight. And there are people who either are like, well, I cannot take that medication, and that has been proven by science, or I do not feel comfortable being on that medication, even if it looks like it's probably safe for my kids. So sometimes people are making that decision for medical reasons. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're making that decision because there's an embryo transfer happening or a pregnancy they're hoping is going to happen. Mm-hmm. I worked with someone on weaning who had been through a lot of fertility challenges, and their fertility clinic would not I can't remember if it was do her embryo transfer or do an earlier part of the process, but they would not take the next step until she had been fully weaned for 30 days.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't want to wean yet. We had lots of conversations about it. And one of the options that she self-initiated was like, I could not wean and not tell them,
Right.
And we talked about how she would feel about that. And ultimately she decided to follow their directions exactly as they gave them. I see fewer people now who are like, I want to wean so that I can get pregnant. But I do see that sometimes. I mean, there are a ton of reasons.
Right. And it's emotional. Like the students that were talking about it in class, they had all sorts of emotion. Like I mentioned, I felt guilty and sad. And another one of them, again, I wasn't part of this conversation, it's more listening. One of them is saying, again, it's going to be freedom. She felt like she was kind of tied to, if she would go out with her friends at night, she had to be back in time for a certain time or pump. And I'm like, I could totally remember that feeling of like carrying a pump around. And then another one was talking about kind of just a relief of being like, all right, things can get a little bit more settled, but it can be so emotional. So that's kind of more about the parent. Let's talk a little bit about signs. Clearly my daughter gave me the sign by literally pushing my boob away. But what are some of the signs that a baby or toddler may be ready to start weaning?
Yeah, that was really rude of her. I mean, I
very on track.
Right? It was after, so Andrea was doing the breastfeeding support group at the prenatal yoga center. And I can't for the life of me remember if it was once a month or twice a month. Do you remember?
It was twice a month. Yeah.
Twice a month. I was going to say, I remember like being sad when we didn't have it. So that makes sense that it was more frequently. So at one point we said to Andrea, like, would you do additional private support groups if we gathered a group? So I gathered a group at my apartment, and this woman who had a baby around the same time as me came. And she was saying to Andrea at the beginning of the session, I think he's ready to wean. And Andrea was like, well, tell me why you think that. And she described his behavior and the kind of turning away and the like being really physically active and just not being really interested in being on her. And Andrea was like, okay, let's see. And she still to this day is still like such an amazing lactation consultant. All she did was like interact with us and support us and answer our questions. And it was very informal. We were eating snacks. And she finally, maybe 45 minutes into the time, goes to that woman and she said, you're right, he's ready. And she said, how do you know? And Andrea was like, I've been watching him. And you would never have noticed that Andrea was watching this little boy. But he just was so interested in everything but his mother's body. So I've already lost track of your question again. I'm so sorry.
What are the signs that a baby or toddler may be starting?
So there's one of the signs. That's one of the signs, right? And like, I would say that is actually not very common. So it happened to you. So you saw it firsthand.
Yeah.
And a baby being like, I am no longer interested in doing this at an age that is like before, I don't know, a year, 18 months, even 2 on their own. I don't see that very often. I see parents initiate or guide a weaning process before then. I mean, that's a great question because I think that most people I work with, they don't wean because the baby is ready to stop. They wean because they're choosing it for whatever reason, or they wean kind of accidentally because something happens, like an illness or hospitalization with them or baby, or, you know, a death in the family or something like that, that suddenly requires a separation between them and their nursing one.
Mm-hmm.
But that's such a great question. It's like the signs would be the baby's not interested. How do you know a baby's not interested? Well, you look at them.
Yeah.
And they're not interested. And when offered, they do something else. But I think sometimes people think, like, I just had someone, how old was her baby at this time? 2 days? I think 2 days old. Might have been day 3. We were FaceTiming and she said, see, he doesn't want it from me. See? And it was because of the way that he was acting at the breast. Now, the reason he was acting that way at the breast is because her breasts were significantly engorged. They were swollen. She had fluids during her birth, so they were like extra swollen.
It's funny you say that. When you said they were engorged at 2 or 3 days, I'm like, oh, I bet it's the fluid. A lot of folks don't. I actually did a podcast on this about the breastfeeding effect with epidurals and how that can change the breast, and then the baby has a hard time latching. I'll make sure it's in the show notes. But when people don't know that, they might just be like, it's not meant to be, and then just give up.
That's right. And a mutual friend of yours and mine, Tanya Wills, taught me something once.
Tanya, yes.
Right? She's so amazing. Tanya, for those of you who don't know, is the most incredible midwife. She also runs Manhattan Birth and Manhattan, I believe it's called Manhattan Midwifery, but she's just a brilliant human being. And I remember she taught me at one point in some training I did with her, you can always create a second chance. Like, you can be like, oh, you need the golden hour and you need to be skin to skin with your baby for an hour, and the baby needs to nurse in that hour, and nobody should mess with the baby in that hour. But like, sometimes people have cesareans. Sometimes babies go to the NICU. Sometimes moms need a minute. Like, sometimes life happens all the friggin' time. And so guess what? The next time they're together, you recreate that opportunity. Like, let's be skin to skin. Let's see if you want to do a breast crawl. Let's latch the baby. You know, let's get you interested. Let's squeeze a little milk out or colostrum out and see what we're seeing. So, like, this is such a fascinating question because I think people sometimes think, and now I'm thinking about a particular member of my family who's an older generation, and she says, my babies didn't want my milk, right? Or didn't like my milk. And then I think back to this woman who's 3 days postpartum on FaceTime saying, see, he doesn't want it from me. And I said to her, it may not be about want. It may actually right now be about ability, feasibility, availability, skill, practice, right? And like, it's not really a skill at that stage. It's more guided by reflexes. But I think some people think my baby's ready to wean when they're actually so full, it's hard for the baby to get on or to stay on. Their milk is moving so fast that it's hard to get on or stay on. Or, and I tell people this all the time because it's one of those things that really screws with your head when you have a new baby, is like, sometimes like an overtired baby looks exactly the same as a hungry baby. So sometimes a baby who is being milk boarded looks the same, behaves the same as the baby who is having a hard time getting the milk out.
Oh, interesting.
So like a slower letdown and a faster letdown, sometimes the behavior is similar, which is called a frustrated baby. Now, if a baby's coughing, choking, gagging, that typically means there's like a fast letdown or it's very full. Sometimes it means the person's been like pumping a lot and the baby's like, whoa, that's coming at me too fast, which is why I always use the term milk boarded. And then but it's a baby's also going to get frustrated if they're like, I am here and it is not coming either at all or as quickly as I would like or in the way that I would like. So those are signs that the baby is frustrated. Those are not necessarily signs that the baby's not interested or wants to wean. Does that make sense?
100%. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, let's start to talk about, are there different strategies and timelines for weaning depending on how old the baby is? So think about that. We will be right back.
If you thought goldenly breaded McDonald's chicken couldn't get more golden, think Golder. Because new sweet and smoky special edition gold sauce is here. Made for your chicken favorites at participating McDonald's for a limited time.
Tonight, turn down the noise of the day and focus on the rest with AGZ, the nightly drink for winding down and resting up. New from AG1. AGZ supports your body's natural sleep cycle with clinically studied key herbs, adaptogens, and minerals in amounts supported by research. And no melatonin, helping you wake feeling rested. Wind down, rest up with AGZ. Learn more at drinkagz.com.
Okay, we are back. So as I was writing this up, I was thinking, is it going to be different for a toddler as opposed to who you can actually talk to and explain things maybe than like, I don't know, an 8-month-old. So are there different strategies or timelines for weaning depending on the baby's age?
Yes, there very much are. So I'm going to start with a longer timeline because this is something I've been going through personally recently. And for these purposes, I'm not going to share this baby's age, okay? But this kid is a toddler, okay? And I'm not going to share the age because if I tell you this kid's age, then everyone listening is going to be like, "Oh, well, I would never."
Your child?
Yeah, my kid.
Oh, I know, but I will keep it to myself.
I know, right? Exactly, right? But people are going to be listening and being like, "Oh, well, I mean, if you're nursing your kid at that age, like that would never apply to me." People like to do a lot of, "Well, that doesn't apply to me." Like I teach hand expression.
Right, so we'll keep it to ourselves.
Right, so we're going to keep it to ourselves. That's right. Okay, so we did some weaning. So this child is now nursing once a day in the morning when she wakes up. Very occasionally she skips it. And like I was home from a birth and extra exhausted recently. My husband was able to like keep her distracted enough to skip it. So that'd be an example. But typically it's once a day in the morning. All right. And she's got a wake up clock. And when it turns green, she's allowed to come upstairs. She comes to my bed. She can nurse fine. But we were nursing twice a day for a while. And we weaned the nighttime feed because we started working with a sleep trainer, which was really important for my husband's and my mental health at the time. And she was an exceptional sleep trainer, but we did an age appropriate weaning with her. And the sleep trainer said to me, "I respect your nursing relationship. And if you want to keep nursing the way that you are, great. I just would recommend that you do that evening nurse at least an hour before bed. So she's not like on the sugar that the milk has right when she's going to sleep." I'm like, wow, I never thought about that.
I never thought about that.
Right? So I, in this case, was able to say to her, "This is what we're going to do for our bedtime routine." But I never said we weren't going to nurse. I just said, "This is going to be our bedtime routine." And we followed the bedtime routine. And a few days in, she goes, "Mommy, we haven't been nursing at night." And I'm like, "Uh-huh." And this, because I was just like, I said to sleep trainer, "Well, we'll just wean her to one. I'd prefer that anyway." And she's like, "Well, you don't have to." I'm like, no, let's just try this. So an age appropriate weaning strategy for an older toddler might be that you simply change the logistics. Like I sit in a different space or I don't hang out with you. Like, I worked with someone recently who was a teacher and she would come home from school and sit in the same spot on the couch every single day. And her little one would come to her and want to nurse every day. And I'm like, all right, so we're going to not sit on that spot on the couch. We're going to instead go outside, or we're going to like maybe do some outings for a little while so you can change the circumstances. So with older babies, some you can explain and talk to about things. Like with one of my kids, I said to her, "We are going to nurse twice a day, and either we can nurse in the morning, and then we're either going to nurse when you get home from daycare or right before bed. You pick." And she picked when I get home from daycare. And so I was like, great. So that's what we did. Now this was a kid who, I guess I can't remember how old she was, 2 and change at that point. So you wouldn't think that she understood everything I said, but she totally did. So you can have conversations with kids earlier than you think you can, and they will get it. So for older kids, explaining things and a change of state works really well. For younger babies, I encourage people to talk to their babies and explain what's going on, which is something I got from Andrea. And I was like, "Andrea, you're crazy. Little babies don't understand if you say, now we're going to switch to the right side. Why would I waste my time and breath saying that?" Andrea's like, "Well, I like to tell the babies what's going on." And over time, with her as my mentor, I understood like, wow, it really can be helpful from an early age if we communicate with people what we're going to do or not do. And so I encourage people to talk to their babies. But more useful for all ages is the change of state. So if the first thing that you do when you get home from work is sit in that particular chair in the baby's room and you nurse the baby, then you're going to switch something. And it can either be change the state, or it can be like, we were trying so hard to get this one baby on a bottle, my team and I, and typically a long time for a baby to take a bottle with us is like 2 weeks. And I think we were at like over 3 with this kid. And what we tried was, you're going to actually sit in the exact same place at the exact same moment that you usually do this. And instead of offering you the breast, we're going to pop in a bottle. We're just going to run the exact same play as if you were nursing. And that kid took to it right away and started doing a bottle then instead of the breast. So it's really like change something. Because there are associations there. So I'm going to stop there because I could go into a lot more detail, but I'd love to hear what follow-up questions you have about that.
I'm not even sure. I think that works for me. That makes a lot of sense. And then for timeline, you said, so for like one baby, you were trying to do 2 weeks to switch to a bottle. Do you have strict, I know you don't have strict timelines.
Yeah.
So do you, I'm answering my own question, but do you have vague timelines for babies compared to toddlers? I'm guessing toddlers, it could be longer. I don't know.
I mean, this is such a great question to ask to a lactation consultant. And now I understand. I remember at some point being like, why don't they just answer the question?
No, I get that, because I guess it depends on the baby. It depends on the circumstances.
So different, right?
But how wonderful is that to then look at the circumstances and remind parents, okay, it's just like birth. There's no specific timeline. How are you and baby doing with this transition? Wow, I just answered the question myself, and I am not a lactation consultant.
Right. And like, I'm also not going to be the people who's like, you should go meet with your lactation consultant about that. Like, it's up to you if you want to meet with someone and like have individual coaching, which I'm sure could benefit you. But like, it's up to you if you want to like talk with an individual about that, someone you trust. However, I do think it really helps. Like, if you have a question, you could wonder it for a long time and you could Google a bajillion times. You could also just go to somebody who can help you answer that question. It's just like, sometimes I have people who come to me and say, how do I increase my milk production? Or how do I get my baby weaned by X, or whatever they ask me? And I'll tell people this all the time. I'm like, I know that to you that I said, if it were a one-off question that I could answer with one answer, I would do it. But in order to answer that question for you, I would need to ask you a whole bunch of other questions. And like, sense. And like a live conversation really works for that. So, and I tell the same thing to the patients we work with. I'm always like, if you have a one-off question after a session, between a session, after we're done, just text it. We'll text you back. But if your question requires us to get a bunch more information, then let's do a session. Let's talk it through. So I think that it really, when I say it's different for everyone, I really mean it because I don't know. There's just so many factors that I don't know. But in general, I don't usually. Occasionally, I'll be able to say to people, I think it'll take you this long to wean. And it might be like, I think this kid is going to be weaned in a month. But it's more likely that I'm like, I just want you to know this kid is not going to be interested in weaning anytime soon. That's more likely what I say to people in that conversation, if it's someone who's been nursing for a while. If it's someone who's earlier, they're typically giving me their timeline and I am there to help them. I got someone who texted me today. She had her baby in early February. She was committed to being weaned within 4 months. That was her number. So we're coming up on that time. And she is probably going to be done shortly after 4 months as planned. But at every iteration, she's been like, okay, now I want to drop this nighttime pumping session. How do I drop that? Or now I want to drop this other thing, right? And I curate it for her. But I'd have to ask you a bajillion questions to answer the question of what the timeline is. I would say in general, the timeline for people ranges from weeks to months to years.
Let me actually follow up with something. So kind of jumping ahead, but so say somebody needs to stop breastfeeding suddenly. What are the safest ways to manage the physical and emotional side effects? And I'm just going to be open. I like to just kind of put everything out there. So between my two kids, I had a couple miscarriages, but I had one where I was about 12 and a half weeks and I was still breastfeeding my son. And when I found this out, and he was, I think he was doing just once a day. I just needed to not have anyone touch me. Like I couldn't have. So I just very suddenly, I'm like, and we are done. And that kind of ties into another question of like, helping the toddler or baby emotionally. So how can the breastfeeding parent, what is the safest way to manage that physical and emotional side effects? As, oh, my boobs hurt. I remember that.
Yeah.
And then you have the emotional side for the child that's suddenly like, what? Huh? What? What's going on? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I have a colleague. Her company is Skilled Lactation Solutions. Her name is Allison. And and I'm telling you this because she has a lot of thoughts on how to help kids wean who present as neurodivergent in some way, like kids who are like significantly attached in some way, really struggle with change. And I think that she would be a great person to talk to about challenging weaning situations, because I think that her experience on that really applies to a lot of other weaning situations. I'm really fascinated by that. Mm-hmm. But I think like the way that you manage it for the child, no matter their age, is you let them know you're still there for them, and you create physical closeness that works for everyone. Nice. And sometimes like my youngest, again, who's still nursing, knows that she cannot touch my boobs without permission ever. Like if I'm changing clothes and she's like, you know, kids are so funny. They're like, squishy butt, squishy boobs, mommy, you're squishy. And they want to like kind of smack you around a little bit, like love pats, I guess. But she and I talk about like, hey, you don't get to touch my body. Like, you know, I don't say it like that, but like, hey, remember, we always got to ask first, and mommy's going to say no sometimes. And I'm allowed to do that because it's my body. Right. But like setting boundaries around what works for us is very important. And our kids also need to be physically close. Like I am 44 years old, and I'm very grateful that my mother is still around and healthy and a big part of my life. And like, I love having hugs from her, you know? So you let them know you're still there. I'm thinking about, I have a close friend who did this, and I know a lot of people since then who've done this, where especially for toddlers, like part of their hugs or cuddles after, the kid is actually allowed to touch their breasts at that time. Maybe not bare breast, but basically, or maybe so, but like basically you can still cuddle with these, and people call them different things. Like I know one person who calls them nums. It's like, you can cuddle with mommy's nums or mommy's milkies, but we're not going to drink from them anymore. And so for some people, if it is okay with that person who's making milk with their body, for some people, it's just like, we're simply going to revise this, where you get to spend time in this spot and you get to spend time with these, I don't know what, like devices. With these like exceptional, what did she call them one time? The like her silly bags or something. Something with bags. People have all kinds of funny names, but like this is an important part of my body that has been important to you too, and I recognize that, and so we're gonna deal with that in a way that works. I don't think that I would be the person who's like, you can come here and like rub my breasts. And I'm not judging someone who, it's just, that's not for me. You can probably tell by the way I say it, that's not for me. But when we wean, she's, you know, I'd be like, you can put your head here. You can rest your head on my bosom. But the bottom line is cuddle time in some way. And for some people that might be like, we're going to take baths together. We're going to take a shower together. Or I'm going to hold you in this way at this particular time in this particular spot. Does that help?
That does. And then the other part of the question is for the breastfeeding parent.
Yeah.
What's the safest way to manage just stopping?
Yeah. Probably not just stopping.
All right, then.
It would be to take, I mean, but I mean, the way that you did it worked for you, didn't you?
It wasn't comfortable. It was very uncomfortable for like a couple days. I actually did, can you believe this was many years ago and I still remember, I did the cabbage leaves. I didn't know that was a thing, but I really did.
Well, did you know they have a cream now?
I did not.
It's called Cabo cream.
Interesting.
And it's a cabbage-based topical thing. It's fascinating. I mean, so, and I don't mean to say like, you can't just like cold turkey. You can absolutely do that. It's just, we will expect some discomfort. And someone like you probably knew enough to be like, I can manage this discomfort without going to pump all day. Like a lot of people are like, oh, well, if I'm going to go cold turkey, then every time I'm uncomfortable, well, damn it, I guess I have to go pump again. You know, like here they go again. And the way that I tell people to manage it, if you would like to stop quickly or need to stop quickly, the way that we manage it is monitoring. honestly, ideally, the number one way we manage it truly is in consultation with someone you trust. You may not need that person. I've a close friend who's on her fourth baby. Like she doesn't need to talk to me as she like goes through the different transitions. She just doesn't. She understands so intimately how it works. But for the majority of people, under the guidance of a lactation consultant in partnership with a professional you trust makes a big difference, because then some of it's off your mental load. Like people will text me and be like, so we took away this feeding today and I'm so nervous. Are you sure I don't need to pump? And like, it's just nice to have someone to run that stuff by. So that's the first thing is like, do you have someone you can run this by that you feel great about, who's like outside of your body? But then second, it's like, how are we going to manage it? Well, we manage it by relieving pain and relieving inflammation. And we do that with, there are a number of different options: ice, cold. People still use cabbage. Some people still swear by cabbage. There's a great tea that a number of people I've worked with have used called No Flow Tea by Pink Stork. None of this is an endorsement, and none of these people are paying me money, truly. It's just like, I'm telling you what some people have used that has really worked, like weaning teas. That I would say the Pink Stork No Flow Tea has worked for a couple people in like really sticky medical situations where they needed to wean quickly. They used that and it worked great. Cabo cream. The number one thing that helps, Deb, is time.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, people are always like, oh, but I'm 44. Am I ever going to go get a PhD or ever going to go study this like obscure architectural thing I'd like to study? Like, I'm going to be whatever age I am, whenever, right? So like the time is going to pass either way. But like the number one thing on your side when you're weaning is time, because your body will adjust the same way it adjusted in the beginning and has adjusted throughout a number of transitions throughout the journey. Your body will adjust. And so you use time, you use cold, you use, you can sometimes use herbal type things like that tea, or, cabbage. I'm sure there are tinctures and other herbs that I don't know about. And then you can also use ibuprofen or other anti-inflammatories, and you can use that for pain relief, because if it is painful, then you can use whatever you would like to use for pain relief.
That is so helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Tell me.
I think it is. So what are some of the biggest myths or misunderstanding about weaning that you'd love to clear up?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this one. One is that weaning means being done completely.
Oh, that's true. Doesn't have
like,
to. You can just wean down.
Like,
yeah.
I'm going to wean myself off of being on my phone all the time, or I'm going to wean myself off of watching TV at 10 p.m. or whatever it is, right? Like we probably mean eventually I'd like to stop that. But what we mean for now is I'd like to lessen this. And so people talk about using baby wed. That's funny. Baby wed leaning. That's a funny people talk about baby-led weaning, which is something I read just the beginning of the book back when it was just a book with my first. And I just really liked it. And I just like ran with it. I didn't even read the rest of the book or look at other resources. I just was like, I'm going to feed my baby like this. So when we talk about baby-led weaning, nobody's using that term to be like, well, they are, I guess, when they're talking about weaning from breastfeeding. But bottom line is like the process of weaning is actually a less over time phenomenon that at some point means it's going to end, which of course it's going to end because I have not met a 30-something who is nursing, So I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions is it's just back to this idea of all or nothing. I think we really get ourselves into trouble. What we should not do.
Yeah.
We definitely should not think, I use that in jest because I hate shitting on ourselves, but like weaning means lessening until it's done. And it is different for everyone, a different timeline for every person, every baby, every kid, every family.
I think one misunderstanding, I'm going to throw this in, is that there has to be a certain cutoff time.
Ooh, yeah.
Because I know, gosh, I can't remember what it was. You would know this. Like the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends a certain time. And then people are like, I think I got there, done. And they don't realize that that's a recommendation. And it doesn't mean that you have to go to that point, or once you get to that point, you're done. It's a personal choice.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. Like, I think I have worked with a lot of people who, let me put it this way, and this is just an anecdote. This is not evidence-based. A lot of people that I have encountered who get to 1 year end up going longer than expected. If they're still breastfeeding at a year.
I think there's truth to that.
Yeah. A lot of people who are still providing breast milk by pumping when baby's 1, but may not be nursing much or at all, are very happy to put that machine away the day the baby turns 1. Or like they'll reach out to me and be like, it's 11 months and 12 days. Could I do it now? I'm like, yes, you can do whatever you want. It's your body. It's your choice. I'm here for you, you know? But I think that so there are people who think that they should stop at a certain time because someone said at some point, and that was me. That was 100% me. One of my closest friends who used to go to the breastfeeding support group at the prenatal yoga center with me. She and I had babies, a few weeks apart, pregnant together. And she did all this research. She was my Google while I was pregnant. And she said she was going to breastfeed. I said, I'm going to breastfeed for however long you're going to breastfeed. Because I knew she'd done all the research. And I was like, I guess I'm going to breastfeed for a year because that's what's healthiest. And she goes, well, actually, the World Health Organization says 2. And I was like, okay, well, are you going to do until 2? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, then I'll do until 2. I just was like, if she was going to jump off a cliff, like really, it was like that at the time. But it's because someone told you or you read something. And then it's so nice though. Our brains love being attached to something and having something that's predictable, because being a parent is so unpredictable, and like postpartum is so unpredictable, and feeding a baby. So it's nice to have something to truly latch onto. Like I can be like, all right, well, on this date, I can be done. But what I don't want to get missed for people is, what do you actually choose? What actually works for you in this new normal? Because there's constantly a new normal that is coming up for us.
100%. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? And you can choose from so many hats. You're a mom, you are a lactation consultant, you were a doula, you still are a doula, like all the things. So think about it. We're going to take a break. We're back. I can't wait to hear what you're going to say. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Okay, we're back. So what is the shiny nugget of truth you're going to leave us with? One final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents?
Gather your team.
Oh, yes.
This is actually a piece of my book that I think is timeless. It's not obsolete. 8 years after I published it, but that's what really made a massive difference for me. Having, even in my first pregnancy, it's like once I had the OB that I felt great about, and once I had the doula that I felt great about, and then once I met the lactation consultant, I was suddenly like, oh my God, things are working, and they're working because I am not doing this alone, and I am somebody who usually is very committed to doing this alone. And so when you said to me, what's the number one piece of advice, my first thought was going to be like, get a lactation consultant while you're pregnant, because that really makes a massive difference to the people I work with day to day, is like having that go-to person, and it's off your mental load who to choose because you already chose. But like, have a friggin' team, have a team of people who you can go to for support, who can guide you and coach you and partner with you and hold your hand and be there when you cry, because your instinct when things are unpredictable might be what is true for most of us humans, which is to hibernate or withdraw or cry alone or whatever. Just like silo it and be a lone wolf and think you have to figure it all out yourself. But if you open yourself up to, I am somebody who gets to have a team of people who support me in having a journey that works for me, then the sorrow is half sorrow and the joy is double joy.
That is really, and I feel like that comes up. Not saying that is not unique, but it's important. That tip comes up so much. And the reason I think it comes up so much is because it is so important. And we often live, like you just said, in the sense of isolation or fierce independence. So I am so glad.
And we can be proud of that.
But, fierce independence is great, but raising a child needs more than one. Yeah, I think
actual villages are needed. Actual.
So much. All right. Where can people find your work?
Great. I think the fastest way people tend to find us is on Instagram. We have an underscore in our Instagram. It's at go_milk yourself. Our website is gomilkyourself.care. And these are the resources for parents. We also have resources for professionals, which you can find on our Instagram as well. And if you are somebody who is interested in connecting with a lactation consultant, we've got a phenomenal team. I always say I only hire people who are smarter than me and know way more than I do. And that is true. Like sometimes people are booking with me recently and I'm like, you should book with her instead. She knows way more about this than I do. That's why I hired her. That's why I did a nationwide search for the best lactation people. So that's where you can find us, is on Instagram, also on Facebook, also on the website. And our website is a new domain. It is gomilkyourself.care.
I don't think I knew that. I'm going to have to make sure I have all that up to date.
There was a technical issue that led to our hand being forced. And then I was so glad because I love gomilkyourself.care. It's pretty cool.
I'm going to have to make sure that on our resource page on the PYC website, we have that because I'm pretty sure I did not change that. Because as you said that, I'm like, I don't think I knew that. All right, so I'll make sure that all that's up to date on our show notes too. Oh, as Francie, as always, so happy to talk with you. You always put a smile on my face. You are a true delight and such a gift to the perinatal community. So thank you for everything you do.
Right back at you, Deb. It's always so phenomenal to be with you. I trust you whole-boobedly. And I am so grateful we got to be together again. And that little girl who said, I just want to help people. That's who you and I get to be in the world. And I'd love to hear from those of you who've listened, how this made a difference for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
Have you ever caught yourself asking, is that me or is that God? If so, you're not alone. I'm Rachel Grohl, host of the Hearing Jesus podcast, a daily show where we open up scripture together and learn what it really means to recognize God's voice in our lives. And I'm excited to share that my brand new book, Knowing God's Voice, debuted as the #1 new release on Amazon in Old Testament Bible study, even before launch. The book goes hand in hand with the podcast, giving you practical tools and encouragement to not just hear God, but to follow Him with confidence. So, whether you tune in each day or pick up a copy of the book, my prayer is the same, that you'll grow closer to God and know Him in a way that changes everything.